everyone. This is Professor Sexton with a video lecture on James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues. First of all, I want to apologize for the darkness of the video for this lecture. I'm in a different location, and the lighting where I am is not as great as where I typically record video lectures. But anyway, first of all, let me tell you about James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues. It is a relatively long short story, so you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time in order to read it because it is long, and you may want to read it in stages if you like. Also, what I'm going to do is in course documents, I'm going to record some sample music pieces that are somewhat related to Sonny's Blues. You don't have to listen to these. They're just extra information that will kind of get you into the content of the story. And most of them are going to be about music because there's a distinction between blues and jazz. And what I want to do is I want to play a sample of blues for you and then a sample of jazz for you in those course documents. And then also there is a song at the end of the short story that Sonny plays on the piano that I also want to let you listen to. As I said before, you don't have to listen to those things that are in course documents. They're just extra information. So James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues is a story told through the point of view of the older brother about the arrest of his younger brother, Sonny, on heroin possession. It is the brother's attempt to understand what has led Sonny down this path. What becomes immediately interesting about the story is that even though it is the older brother telling the story, we never learn his name. The question that we have to ask ourselves is why does Baldwin choose not to give this brother a name? One argument would be that the story is about Sonny. After all, the story is titled Sonny's Blues. However, as we read the story, we see that it's also a story about the older brother, and most importantly, his relationship with Sonny over the years. His brother's arrest makes him reflect on the boy that Sonny used to be. He recalls that as a boy, Sonny's face had been bright and open, but that light has gone out of his face. As a school teacher, the older brother sees future Sonnies and his male students and speculate that all of those boys, like Sonny and himself, only knew two types of darkness: the darkness of their lives and the darkness of the movies, which had blinded them to the other darkness. After school, the older brother encounters an old friend of Sonny. And this friend is obviously strung out on drugs, and the older brother has conflicting emotions concerning the guy. In some ways, this interaction foreshadows the reunion meeting with the older brother will have with Sonny later in the story. At the end of the encounter with the friend, the older brother promises that he will write Sonny, but he doesn't for a long time, and only after his daughter dies. We never know what the older brother wrote to Sonny, but we do get Sonny's response, which is really interesting to read. And after reading the letter, the older brother indicates that it made him feel like a bastard. Sonny's response is interesting for a number of reasons, but there are two that I want to pinpoint. First, Sonny tells his brother that what happens to him had nothing to do with him being a musician. And music is an important topic in this story. After all, the title is Sonny's Blues. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about the musical type of genres in this story. Blues is a music genre originating with African Americans in the Deep South, particularly Mississippi, and some people attribute it to around about the 1860s. It has its roots in African American songs and spiritual, and often incorporates field hollers, shouts, and chants. Traditionally, blues are more in the ballad form with lyrics often depicting sadness. And while the title of the work is called Sonny's Blues, Sonny wants to be a jazz musician. There's a difference between blues and jazz. Blues is older, and many of its aspects can be found in jazz. But the fundamental difference between the two is blues is often more melancholic. So it's more sad, sharp, and slow. Whereas jazz often is more lively and upbeat, having its origins um, coming mainly out of New Orleans and heavily influenced by calypso and swing music. So one of those things that I'm going to play for you and of course document is going to be a sample of a blues song, and you'll hear how slow and sad that is as opposed to a jazz song. And I'm going to have the jazz song be won by Charlie Parker, because Charlie Parker is the musician that the older brother mentions that he wants to be like. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of overlap between jazz and blues. So it is not uncommon to hear in some blues a same kind of lively, upbeat um, tone. And jazz is also common to see some of that sadness come through as well. Um, so what I'm going to play for you is not the definitive way to look at the jazz and blues, but it's just to kind of give you some insight to what's happening here in the story. Um, Music, as I said before, is an important topic in this story, but keep in mind there's a difference between a topic and a theme. Topic is just that it's something that shows up over and over again. Theme is that you have to say something about the music. What does it do? How does it function in the story? How does it help us understand what's going on in the story? Recall when the older brother first encounters Sonny's old friends, he mentions the bar where the music caused the pavement to shake. This is just one of the many instances in which music is prevalent in the story. Pay attention to how often music appears and what each moment signifies. Second, what's most important about this letter that Sonny responds to his older brother is we learn the name of the older brother's daughter who has died, and her name was Grace. And some of the questions you want to ask yourself, is there a significance in that name? Think of what grace means and how that definition of the word in the older brother's daughter dying leads to him writing his brother. Are there other ways that grace appears in this story? So that's something too that you can think about. When Sonny gets out of rehab, the two brothers meet again after a long absence. The older brother refers to him as his baby brother and notes the 7 year difference between them. He recalls that he was there when Sonny made his first steps in the world. And this is a quotation from the story itself. When he started to walk, he walked from my mother straight to me. I caught him just before he fell when he took his first steps ever in the world. Consider how this reflection might bias the older brother's view of Sonny now. Is he trying to catch him before he falls? And what does he think of himself if he's not there to catch Sonny? In the story, there's a series of flashbacks when the older brother revisits earlier pivotal events, such as after his father dies and his mother tells him that he had an uncle who died tragically, and she tells him that he shouldn't let anything to happen to Sonny. But she states that he can't prevent that. He simply has to be there, which he isn't. He actually marries 2 days after that conversation and is gone. When he returns, his mother has died, and he has a conversation with Sonny, in which Sonny tells him he wants to be a musician. The older brother doesn't understand this career choice because he seems to look down on musicians and fear that Sonny won't be able to make a living from his music. And what you see here is a conflict between Sonny and the older brother. And there are numerous conflicts between Sonny and the older brother that the story keeps revisiting time and time again. The brother tells the story of how Sonny goes to live with Isabel and her family while he's away in the military. What is revealed is how Sonny practiced the piano all the time, skipped school, and then had a fight with Isabel's parents, which caused him to leave altogether. When the brother returns, he finds Sonny is living in the village, but the gap between them is too wide, and the older brother's attempt to reconcile fails. The story then flashes forwards to the present when Sonny is living with his older brother and Isabel after returning from rehab. One day, the older brother is tempted to search Sonny's room, looking for drugs, but he's distracted from the sounds of people below holding a revival meeting. He is drawn to the window where he observes the singers and then eventually spots Sonny standing on the edge of the crowd, carrying a notebook and looking almost like a schoolboy. What is even more significant is that the narrator notes that the coppery sun brought out the copper and Sonny's skin, harkening back to an earlier memory that the brother had of Sonny before the drugs. Um, when Sonny returns to the apartment, he invites the older brother to come see him perform that night. However, what is significant in this conversation that they have it seems to be the first adult one in which the narrator views his brother as an adult and not his baby brother. He is still very much the older brother, but it seems that he's more closely now. In an earlier conversation after their mother had died, Sonny accused him of never hearing him. It seems now that the older brother is trying to hear Sonny. The story ends at the club where the older brother goes to hear Sonny's play. The older brother comments on the family that Sonny has there. Not biological, but people who are there for Sonny, the way the mother had wanted the older brother to be. As Sonny gets ready to perform, the older brother comments, "All I know about music is that not many people ever really hear it." Why it seems that he's making this statement about other people, it is truly about him. He is one of those who has never heard music, and the story somewhat progresses from him taking notice of music outside of the bar where the story opens to the revival scene a few pages earlier to now. Furthermore, he begins to realize the important role the musician makes because his job is to create music where there has been nothing, whereas the listener has the benefit of experiencing what the musician has created. So there's a lot going on in this story. And as I said before, even though the story is called Sonny's Blues, and which will make you think that the story is focusing particularly on Sonny, you actually learn a lot about the older brother as well, especially how he reacts to the world. There are a number of conflicts in the story. There's a conflict that Sonny has within himself. There's a conflict that the older brother has within himself. And more importantly, there's the conflict that Sonny and the older brother have. So if you were going to approach this paper for the conflict assignment option, there are a number of ways that you can go with this. But the other option is to look at themes. And there are a lot of themes in this story that you can also pinpoint on. Now, in this video lecture, I didn't talk about those themes in a lot of detail, but I'll just bring up some of them. Like, for instance, the role that music plays in the story. So keep in mind the numerous times that music is mentioned in the story. The bar where the older brother hears the music, the music outside the window, the music when Sonny begins to play. But keep in mind, if you choose to work with music as a theme, you have to say something about the music. What does the music do in this story? How does it function? How does it help us understand the characters? So you have to do a lot more with it than just say that there's a lot of music in the story. Another one will be the role of names in this story. So I've already mentioned that the older brother, who's our narrator, we never learn his name. So that's one important issue. But then think about Sonny's name. It's Sonny. Now, I'm not certain if that's a nickname or if that's his given name. But if you think about Sonny, look at it, Son, son. And so, what does that mean? What does that imply? And does the older brother treat him like a son? And then think about the older brother's daughter's name. Her name is Grace, and she dies from polio when she's 2 years old. We never see her in the story. I mean, there's a flashback when the older brother talks about when she dies and how his wife reacted to that. But think about the name Grace. It's not just a name, but think of what grace means and how does that function in the story. So you could talk about names in the story, the narrator whose name we don't have, Sonny's name, who we get, and Grace's name. But once again, if you do this, what do those names? How do those names help us understand this story? Another possible theme that you could talk about is the play between light and dark in this story, because throughout the story, James Baldwin makes references to light and dark. When the older brother is first talking, he talks about the light that used to be in Sonny's face, and then how that light goes. He talks about the darkness that the young boys in Harlem experience, the darkness of their lives and the darkness of movies. He talks about darkness when he's remembering their childhood and when the older people would sit in the apartment and talk until darkness settled in. And then all of a sudden, when they notice the darkness, they turn the lights on and start talking about those serious topics. You can also talk about the darkness of the nightclub at the very end of the story, which is also there. So these things are something that repeat over and over again. But keep in mind, and I know you're going to get tired of me saying this, in order to be a theme, you have to talk about how the light and darkness function in this story. What purpose do they serve? Then that becomes a theme. Another thing that you can also talk about if you wanted to deal with theme in the story, look at the various conversations that the older brother has with Sonny. There's at least three. There's a conversation after their mother dies. And then there's two conversations that they have once Sonny gets out of rehab. You can analyze those three conversations and kind of figure out what's going on there, but then you'll have to create a theme out of those. Sonny's Blues, as I said before, is a long story, and this video lecture didn't go into it in detail. I mean, there are a lot of different points about it that I just couldn't cover in this video lecture because it would have been horribly long. So you want to make sure that you do read it carefully. What I tried to do in the video lecture is to highlight kind of like the flow of the story, what happens in the story, some of the things that you should pay attention to, and some of the major points that I think are relevant in the story. But as I said before, you do want to read it for yourself, and maybe reread it or read it in sections, because it is a very long story, but at the same time, it's a very powerful and very moving story. So I hope that you enjoy your reading of James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues. Take care, everyone. Bye.